In my 20 plus years of coaching lifters at every level, from the local meet to the world championships, I've seen the same mistakes over and over again. Every week I review lifts submitted by real lifters in the Weightlifting AI Discord community, and today you'll see some of the most common errors and how to fix them and how to apply it to your own training. All right, let's take a peek in the Discord. So first video here is some snatches. These are 95% snatches. These were done by a lifter named Rollins, and I actually did a little review of these earlier, but this is a super common problem that you're gonna see in the snatch. And if we just watch the video first, he takes about 5 attempts here at this snatch, misses a bunch of them. And this is pretty common for beginner lifters when you see the way they pull. First thing we're gonna look at after we see a couple more of these misses, if you can't identify it already, is just, purely that right off the ground, his hips pop up really early in the lift. So if we watch, we can see in slow-mo, look at the hips. They shoot way up to the point that the bar gets to the knee here and his back is almost parallel to the floor. So he's way out over the bar, hips have shot up fast, the bar's at the knee. This position's not bad with the bar at the knee, shin's vertical, but you can actually tell he has almost a negative shin angle, meaning that his shin is tipped backwards and all that weight's way back on his heels. And when we watch the next couple frames, what's gonna happen is that he's gonna shift his toes up off the ground. You can see right here, big toe comes up off the ground. That tells me that entirely all of his weight is shifted back to his heel. And then as he makes that transition where he pushes the knees back under the bar here, throws the head back at the same time, body weight shifts way forward to the toe, and you can see that his right or his left foot is now completely off the heel. So his balance has shifted from mid-foot in the start of the pull all the way back to his heels, knees way back, and the bar is just out in front of him. Then he shifts the other way as he makes the transition, as the knees come back under into this position, and he's gonna scoop his hips under and then make contact with the bar here, but all his weight's on his toes. So he went toes, back to the heel too far, way back to the toe too far, and then we watch, he makes contact and ends up putting his feet back on the ground really early, which tells me he didn't get a very good extension because he wasn't driving all the way through the top of the lift. He lands, the bar's not really in front of him, but it just isn't gonna be a stable position because essentially what's happening here is he's falling under the bar because he didn't get a great explosion, and then the bar's gonna come down on him and crash on him. This is super common. It all stems from a couple of things. So first and foremost, off the ground, his hips are rising way too fast. That tells us one thing, which is that his legs are not necessarily strong enough to hold him up in the right position off the ground. So he's coming up off the floor, hips shoot up, all that pressure gets dumped onto his low back, which is stronger than his legs most likely. We can also tell that just by looking at him, he's got pretty long legs. And so right away you're gonna get to a situation where you're not able to hold a good position in your back angle to get that bar into the right position at the knee. So we get exactly what we get here. A little hop forward, body's tipped over, the bar's sweeping out or coming forward, or it's just not coming back enough, and he ends up in a spot where when he goes to catch it, he's kind of falling under the bar rather than actually, pulling himself under with a good extension at the top. So how do we fix this? First and foremost, in training, try to avoid the mistake. So we'd want to try to avoid having this happen where when it gets heavy and you start to notice this happening, that weight where you start to really let your hips come up off the ground, or you start to tip over too much, or you notice your weight is shifting more than it should be, stop there and start drilling that technique more and more. So start to do your lifts more correctly with lighter weights, because if you start accumulating more training volume right in that range just below where you're having trouble, you're actually gonna start to get better because you actually have this ability to sort of be right at the threshold of your capabilities, but you're accumulating good quality reps and you're training yourself to do the thing correctly. So that's the first thing, is if it starts to fall apart with heavier weights, try to avoid those weights, try to avoid doing too much there. That doesn't mean only do the PVC pipe or the empty bar. It just means don't spend a lot of your training time and volume at weight ranges that are not productive for technical development. The second thing I would say is you need to get his legs stronger, right? So I would say up the volume of squatting that you're doing and then maybe reduce some of the pulling movements you're doing. spend more time building leg strength so you can hold that position, right? Make sure that your legs are starting to develop adequate strength so you can get your legs involved off the floor and keep your chest up off the ground. The third thing I would say is start to incorporate, maybe swap exercises out to be like maybe some pause exercises. Anything you can do to really emphasize perfecting those positions. When you add a pause into the middle of a lift, so for an example in the snatch, if he was to do a pause maybe at the knee or right off the floor, he's gonna basically terminate that lift from being incorrect. So as soon as he comes off the ground, if he stops, he can now correct the position of his hips, keep them down, and then continue the lift from there. So a pause right off the ground would be good for him. A pause at the knee would be really good because he can correct that position. He can get his shin angle back to vertical. He can bring his chest up, drop his hips down, hold that position for a few seconds, and then complete the lift. So I like pauses for that very reason. It just gives him a chance to sort of interrupt the mistake he's making and then correct it later on. So that's what I would recommend here. He could do those pause lifts maybe a little bit lighter, more like 70, 80% volume or intensity, and then add some volume in there, along with upping the squat frequency. So do more squatting throughout the week, do more squat volume throughout the week, and see if that corrects it. That's what I would suggest for him. Real quick, if you're looking for a personalized, adaptive weightlifting program that's made completely for you and adapts daily to your needs, check out Weightlifting AI. It is the only product of its kind. It has been battle tested by thousands of lifters who are hitting PRs every day, and you can try it for 2 weeks completely free by using the code 2weektrial at checkout. It's the first link in the description of this video. All right, let's move on to the next. This athlete here, he's done a really good clean and jerk. I actually really like his clean, but I want to point out something on the jerk, and this is pretty common. So we watched the clean. He actually moves extremely well in the clean. I'm really happy with the way his clean looks. On the jerk, he only does one thing that I'm not super happy with. He gets his front foot down. You can see right here, his front foot is gonna land way earlier than his back foot. And the reason we don't like this is that when all of your body weight is on your front foot, or you put everything forward into the jerk, it just continues to reinforce that same behavior. So as the jerk gets heavier, as you get more tired, and as you get more sort of stuck in this position of I'm going to put a lot of effort into this, you shift everything to that front leg. When all your weight's on your front foot, it's really difficult to balance, it's really difficult to stabilize the weight, and especially when it gets heavy, you're gonna have a tendency to press out more, because as your foot comes down and your foot lands on the ground, you're gonna start pressing into the bar to get locked out. What's gonna happen is your front foot comes down and then you're gonna start pressing with the arms. You're already at the bottom of the split, and that's gonna be a press out. So when your feet hit the ground and you continue the motion into the press, that's against the rules. It's just not a good position to be in. So what do we wanna do instead of getting our front foot to land first? We wanna get our back foot down first. Now in this case, he makes the lift fine. It's not like a catastrophic mistake or anything, but you can tell that as it gets heavier and as he gets more developed, that could turn into a problem. So what I would suggest is, really emphasizing, let's play this, really emphasizing getting the back foot down first. And that's gonna be something that's gonna start really, really light because it's not something he's gonna be used to. So I would say early on in the training, first thing, anytime he does a jerk or anytime he has a clean and jerk day, he should do some kind of a stepping jerk balance where he's practicing just the sequence of footwork. So drive the bar up, back foot comes down, hits the ground first, then he locks the arms and stomps the front foot at the same time. It's a really simple drill. It's just basically a jerk that's done very slowly in sequence, but it gives you a chance to practice what it's like to get that back foot on the ground and then continue into the lockout of the jerk before the front foot hits the ground, which will correct a lot of these errors. In his case, it's not super bad, but doing that drill basically every day he warms up is gonna help. The other thing about that drill that you have to be sort of aware of is don't just do it with the empty bar. The empty bar drills are fine, but they aren't gonna transfer well to heavier weights. So what I would suggest is start with the empty bar till you get the sequence down. Then basically as soon as you can, start adding weight to the drill until it starts to become an ingrained motor pattern that you can transfer to actually heavier jerks. So maybe he starts with the empty bar, then he goes to 40 kilos, then 50, then 60, and eventually he should be able to do the drill with, there's no magic percentage here, but it wouldn't surprise me to have someone doing 50% of their best jerk that way. But really, as it gets heavier, it should just turn into a jerk. So it's not something that's like two separate things like a drop snatch and a snatch. It's just a jerk done slower. That would be the biggest thing and probably the only thing I would say for him to work on here. So good job, but yeah, let's work on that jerk footwork. All right, our next lifter is Sean. Sean posted a clean and jerk from the blocks above the knee. So we're gonna watch this and see how it looks. I'll give you my opinion on it and try not to make too much fun of him. So here's the lift in full speed. Very powerful, there's a strong pull. This is like 141 kilos. He makes the jerk, and there's a lot going on in this video, so I'll break down a couple of things. First and foremost, really powerful athlete. He's racking 141 off the blocks, and it's a strong pull. If we go down here and go a little bit slower, we can analyze these positions. So right here in this position where he's basically after the power position in the sort of what we would call end of the second pull, sort of the final extension here. He hasn't quite straightened his legs, but his hips have opened up completely. This is not an awful position, but it's not necessarily ideal. We'd like to see him a little bit more vertical with the hips back a tiny bit more. This just tells me he's relying on his hips a lot more at the end of the pull. That's not necessarily incorrect, but it's something that can happen when you lift from the high blocks, especially in the clean. High blocks have an ability to sort of give you this advantage where you can fire off your hips and reduce the inclusion of your legs at the top of the lift. And if you're able to do that, you can sometimes lift more from the blocks than you can from the floor. Blocks can really exaggerate somebody who's not strong off the ground because they don't have to pull it off the floor. So you might sometimes see people go from high blocks and do 5-10 kilos more off the high blocks than from the ground. And if they're really powerful and don't have super strong legs, you could be even higher than that. So not surprising to see this kind of thing happen. This looks like a really heavy weight for him. So you're gonna see something where a little bit of an exaggeration of the use of the hips here. I would like to see a little bit different position here, but it's not like something I'm gonna, try to correct and destroy his whole lifting career and make him suffer doing technique work all the time to get a little bit more out of his legs. So yeah, overall the clean's pretty good. The next thing we'll see here in the clean that I think is sort of worth pointing out is when he racks the bar. This position's great. I love seeing cleans done where you're racking the bar basically at parallel or slightly above that. So racking it, in my definition, is just that he's gotten his elbows all the way around, they're up high, the bar's on his shoulder, and his hips are, essentially in line with his knee. This, if it was a powerlifting squat, would get red lights, which to me is a good sign. He's racking it high, depending on the federation. If you're in West Side Barbell, it'd be a super deep squat. But right now, this is really good. So great position for him to rack the bar. Really like this. Let's look at the rest of it. And this is kind of where things go a little south for him in the clean. It's a little jarring. You can see him, he kind of shakes, he catches it. His elbows do drop a little bit as he hits the bottom of the squat. That could be a couple things. It could be that he's got a little bit of mobility stuff, he's a little bit tight, his upper back might not be super strong or super stable there. It could just be the way he racked it. He caught this one and it kind of pushed him down. As a coach, you'd have to see a few more of these lifts to really say definitively it's this thing. I would just say that in this case, the one cue I would give him to fix this clean or to improve it would be something I like to tell people, which is to think about receiving the weight in the middle of your thigh. So when you're racking the bar in the clean and you catch it, which he just did really well, we saw that rack position, you want to imagine that pressure of that barbell is basically cutting your thigh in half. It's in the middle of your leg. And that's going to give you better sense of balance. If you try to think about the position of your knee and your hip and your chest, it's sort of not a great cue, right? It's a little bit too internal thinking of the positions. But if you think about the feeling of, oh, I land and all the pressure's in the middle of my thigh, it's just a much more vague thing, but it's easy to identify. You can tell when there's pressure in the middle of your quad. So I like that as a cue. Think about landing with the bar and the pressure in the middle of your leg. He's balanced midfoot here, but you can tell he kind of got kicked back and dropped back down a little bit. We'll see what happens as he recovers. He gets up fine, obviously a strong dude. So goes into the jerk here, and then that's where the shit hits the fan. So he lands in the jerk. I'll talk about a couple things here. Let's break down his jerk, then I'll talk about where things kind of fall apart. Okay, so start of the dip. He's in a good position here. He's got a pretty good front rack. His elbows are in a decent position. As he goes into the draw or the dip, He comes down, and you can see he does cave a little bit at the bottom of the dip. So he comes down. Right here at the very bottom, you can see just a little bit of that chest coming down. The elbows drop a tiny bit. His weight might have shifted forward a little bit, which is not unusual for people that maybe have a little bit stronger hips. They sometimes curl forward or roll forward just a hair at the bottom of the dip. And what's going to happen here as a result of that is when he drives the bar, he's going to end up in a position where when he actually racks it overhead or receives it, his elbows are not in a great spot. The bar did not go up and back behind his head. So all of his weight, you can see right away, all of his body weight is way forward on his front foot. That knee is way out over the toe. He's got a bit of hyperextension in the back. He's compensating with that low back position to get the bar stable overhead. So his chest is forward, his back is arched, and his elbows and the bar just slightly in front of his head, is kind of his face really. This is a byproduct of two things. One, probably needs to do some mobility work specifically for his upper back and his upper body. He just needs to get into a much more stable position overhead. His arms are externally rotated, meaning that he's turned his elbow this direction, so the bar is sitting in front of him and his elbow is basically in front of the barbell. Not a stable position. You don't want a ton of external rotation overhead with the jerk because the bar is just going to move forward because of that. The other downside to this is that because he's probably tight overhead or has some mobility issues in his upper body, he's kind of stuck in a place where he's compensating in many other ways. The low back is arched to get his chest back more so he can stabilize. The knee is forward to compensate for the low back. And he's got this really kind of compromised split position where he's sinking down because the knee is forward and his elbows are not really locked out super well. The bar is slightly forward. So it's just kind of a shit show of an overhead position. Not all hope is lost though, because if he does improve mobility and he gets a little bit more improvement there overhead, he should be able to make it. He's clearly super strong because he just pushed the bar up overhead and then recovered. The other thing that happens in the video that you'll notice is that when he hits the split position, you can see his back foot basically slide backward. And let's go back here. So when he hits the ground, watch that knee. It's kind of hard to tell, but you can see that his knee externally rotates. His whole hip externally rotates. Let's cut it back, yeah. So you can see the bottom of the knee sleeve, the little logo there. He hits the ground. His knee is probably in a good position. You can't see his back foot, but I'm going to guess it's not straight forward. It's probably turned out a little bit. And then as he continues, that foot continues to rotate outward. The knee rotates out further, and then that position slides, and then the back foot ends up sliding. It ends up sliding, or looks like it slides on the platform, and then he kind of corrects that and rotates it inward again. The downside to having your foot rotated out like this is that you start to apply lateral pressure to the knee, which isn't good. We don't want to be in a spot where the foot is turned out and the knee is going this way. There's a million people that can post in the comments about this guy did that, this guy did this, Ronnie Weller did that with his foot, Ian Wilson did that with his foot. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that can happen that you can get away with, right? People get struck by lightning and they don't die. It doesn't mean that it's something you want to do every day. So in this case, it's like not ideal. We always want to try to strive to move ourselves toward better technique that's safer and more sustainable because you can't train when you're injured. So in this case, because the block's obscuring it, I'm guessing what happened is his foot landed outside like that, then he twisted it back in to come back. So that's kind of a diagnosis of like what we saw. How do we fix all this? So the first thing is we cued a little bit on the clean. We kind of clean that up. I would say focus on racking the bar with the pressure on your legs. Make sure you're in a good position there. The second thing on the jerk is we do need to work on his, call it mobility overhead, his upper body basically. You can tell he's a little bit tight in the chest. He's probably a little bit tight in the shoulder and the upper back. He's jacked, so there's a lot of muscle there that's probably going to need some kind of work. Do some mobility work. Do some work to improve the position of your overhead. Something like a jerk support, something like pressing from behind the neck. If you're doing any kind of strict pressing like bench press or strict press, like maybe drop that a bit and focus on just getting more mobile there first. Those are the first things I would do right away. Let's try to clean up some mobility. The second thing is in the jerk, you've got to improve the footwork. So back to what we talked about the last guy, the stepping jerk balance is definitely the first thing to do. Get the position of your back foot down, get your front foot into a good position so your shin is now vertical, not inclined forward with your knee over your toe, and just clean that up in general. As far as exercises to do, because that's our favorite thing to do is throw a new exercise in, I would suggest in his case probably something more like, start with a progression or a complex, like a push press plus a jerk. Because what it's going to do is it's going to give you a chance to slow down and focus on the dip and drive more, and it gives you a chance to get exposure to the overhead position so he can get his elbows and his arms internally rotated overhead, which will give him a little bit of a proprioceptive guideline for what it's going to feel like to get the jerk there. Then progress from that push press plus jerk into a power jerk plus a jerk. I'm guessing if he does a power jerk, he might not be very comfortable there. Based on the position of his back, hyperextended, and his shoulders and everything being where they are in the split jerk, doing a power jerk is probably gonna be a challenge. So power jerks, and then what I would do on the power jerk that I know he wouldn't like is an overhead squat. So I do one power jerk plus like 2 overhead squats on almost all your warm-up sets into your heavier weights in the jerk. You could even do a split jerk plus overhead squats as well as you progress into like bigger training days, but those 2 overhead squats are gonna be really helpful as far as building stability overhead. You're gonna get just some strength adaptations as well because you're holding the bar overhead for a long time, but it's gonna open up that upper body a lot more for the positioning overhead. So that's what I would suggest doing is push press plus jerk as a primer, as a warm-up drill, as a complex, power jerk plus overhead squat, and then maybe even power jerk plus jerk, along with developing that footwork and timing with the stepping jerk balance. So that's my 2 cents on those 3 lifters. I think those are really good cues. I think that's probably the best coaching anyone's ever gotten in this kind of format. So maybe we'll never have to do this again because we finished it, we won that game. But otherwise, pretty solid lifting overall. I think that these guys are going to benefit a lot from incorporating some of those things, and there's a lot to be learned there, a lot of drills, a lot of stuff, but keep it simple. When you guys take this to your own training and apply it, make sure you're focused on not introducing a ton of new things, just work on the most obvious problem, right? One thing at a time, fix the biggest low-hanging fruit, and then move on to the next thing. You don't need to fix every problem all at once, just work on the things that are gonna make the biggest difference. If you like this breakdown, hit the like button, subscribe, and check out my video reacting to Carlos Nassar's world records.